Hello guys, thank you for checking out today's quick reaction video to the Russell Westbrook news of apparently wanting out of Houston. If you haven't already, go subscribe so you can keep up with our videos and not miss a beat. Let's get right into it. What a shocking and huge set of news to come out obviously today. Like the Rockets and GM Daryl Morey doubled down and went for it last year by trading for Russell Westbrook and giving up a lot to go get him. They sent out Chris Paul, 2 firsts in 2024 and 2026, along with 2 pick swaps in 21 and 25. So that's a lot of assets to really send out, especially on the draft pick side, for a team that's already committed so much financially and is contending. Those draft picks really allow you to build up your roster, build up a pipeline, so over time you can keep filling in talent and competing for longer periods. So to have Westbrook say that he wants out a year later after you move those assets is a huge devastating blow. The Rockets just have not been able to get over the hump the last handful of years. And when they were up 3-2 on the Warriors, that seems like an eternity ago. They're likely a Chris Paul hamstring injury from being able to at least make the finals that year. But again, looking back on the last handful of years, this team has just not gotten it done. Now you have to respect now 76ers GM Daryl Morey and the team for always going out and going for it. They went out and got Chris Paul. Then they used Chris Paul to go out and get Russell Westbrook. So they've always tried to show the city of Houston and James Harden that they're willing to do whatever they can to win. There aren't many organizations and teams that are doing it the way they've done it. And for the most part, they have won games. Like they've done well in the regular season. They've been successful. They've obviously had James Harden, who's had all NBA numbers, but they just have not won the biggest prize of them all, and that's the NBA title. This past postseason in the bubble down in Orlando, you saw in their matchup against the Lakers, the Rockets' lack of size, offensive sets, and really continuity really hindered their ability to compete, and it wasn't a competitive series. So it really left them with a lot of questions, and we knew this offseason would be a big one with so many questions around the coach, Morey, their owner, Tillman Fertitta, and how he would react to things. So again, where do they go from here? Like now that this news has come out and leaked, how do they transition from this request? Now looking at Russell Westbrook himself, Russ is still a really good player in the NBA, but he is starting to get up there in age. I think he's going to be 31, 32. His skills have not fully developed over his career thus far, the way you would probably hope and would have projected. But he definitely is an all-world, all-NBA player still. He brings effort on both sides of the ball. He rebounds really well. At times, he struggles to shoot from the perimeter, which is his Achilles heel ultimately. And he can be a little bit turnover prone. You saw that in the series against the Lakers. Part of that was just Russ and him not being able to fully play. But that's something that with the shooting and turnovers, those have kind of plagued him throughout his career. So what's going to be the difference for him to get back to some of the things he was doing in OKC? Does him going to another team and just having the ball in his hands more consistently so he can get into a better rhythm and flow? Is that the difference? Is that what will get him back to what we know and see in what he's capable of? Only time is going to tell. And again, we're just going to have to wait and see where he ends up. Now, moving back to the Rockets a little bit, I think the challenge for them is that they're going to have a lot of holes to fill. And obviously, we all know, the whole world knows that Russ wants out. Like, that's going to hamper some of the leverage, some of the negotiations when a player wants out and he also doesn't have the value that he once had. So the Rockets are going to need to be able to rebuild their roster. They obviously still have James Harden, so they need to go and compete and win. They need able wings, able bigs who can fit the way the game is played today, that have size, that can match up with the Lakers and Nuggets, but also be able to bring something to the table offensively. I mean, Clint Capella would probably be great, but anyways, so those guys just don't grow up on trees. Otherwise, the Rockets would have them, and they wouldn't have 6'5", 6'6" guys playing center like they did in the bubble. You've got other reports, obviously, that Harden had some questions and just wanted to check in on the team's direction, but he's good to go for this upcoming season. PJ Tucker is one that you're seeing more reports about his contract and his value to what he's contributed. Obviously, he's been a big part of their team and club the last few years, so there's trouble on that front. Like I said, he played center at 6'5" against the Lakers, the Nuggets. So he definitely deserves it and is a valuable piece and part to their team. In addition, Eric Gordon, a sniper, big shooter, has seen there are some rumblings that he may be a little bit upset about his regression in use the last few years. And on top of that, you're obviously bringing in a new GM, a new head coach. So it's really crazy times down in Houston. And I think what they can do and obviously how they react to things is going to be interesting. And right now, let's kind of project and look at a few potential places or teams that they can look to try to make and move Russ to maybe get some picks back, get some young talent to try to rebuild and replenish. And I think the first team that really comes to mind, and everyone's kind of mentioning it, are the Knicks. They obviously have a young roster. They're in the biggest market in the world, an iconic Madison Square Garden, and they're just waiting, oozing. That city is itching for a star. Not sure how much value they can send back to Houston, or if their really new leadership team would want to bring on a 31, soon-to-be 32-year-old who isn't a great shooter and is also going to be owed $40+ million a year. So maybe not as ideal for the Knicks, but it probably is one of the best fits for Russ. Will the Clippers make a run at him and go get him? Likely not. That takes the ball out of PG and Kawhi's hands, and Russ isn't better than those players at this time. So it just doesn't make sense there. Milwaukee could fit from a player and financial standpoint, but I don't think you really ideally want to pair Giannis and Russ just from the way teams already play in Milwaukee. That would be brutal. They wouldn't be able to shoot, and that just wouldn't work. I think Miami could obviously use a piece to put them over the top, but again, the way Russ plays doesn't really fit that style and team play. The same could be said for the Nuggets. You know, the Nuggets already have Jamal Murray. They're a team that's on the rise, but again, they have talent in a way that they've developed in play. So Westbrook probably doesn't make sense for them. Utah, they kind of have the camaraderie. They put the ball in Donovan Mitchell's hands a lot, so he probably does need a playmaker, but they do have Mike Conley. Conley's a little bit better shooter than Russ, so that probably doesn't make sense either. So those are some of the immediate contenders. Brooklyn obviously has Kyrie. It just gets really tricky to find a great fit for where Russ is and a team that will give up something of value to the Rockets, like the Rockets did to the Thunder last year, where it just makes sense to go get him. Orlando probably makes sense from like a basketball standpoint. They need the talent, they need a point, but I don't think they really have interest. Like, who knows what Orlando's trying to do? They've been on the rebuild plan since Shaq was there and left. And I don't really think Westbrook would have any interest there either. The Pelicans have a bunch of young talent. They're going to need to pay those young guys over the next few years. And Lonzo is pretty similar. Obviously, he's not the same as Russell Westbrook, but a lot of Russ's strengths are things that Lonzo does really well. So I think, the Pelicans are out. Sacramento has Fox. Phoenix would be interesting to pair him with Devin Booker. And he might be the type of player that you bring in to take that next step. Phoenix went 8-0 in the bubble, but you just don't know. Maybe Phoenix, that can be one to watch out for. I think out east, it could be interesting if the Hawks, Atlanta went out, moved Trae Young off the ball a little bit more, and paired him up with Russ. I think that would be something that could work, but how much of that would stunt Trae's abilities and continued growth? Like, you probably want to just give him the ball, let him go, because that team is maybe a few more years away still. So a lot of questions. I think the wildest move is if the Wizards, maybe reach out and say, hey, let's swap Russell Westbrook with John Wall. But at that point, they're basically the same player. Wall's a lot younger, but it's coming off the injury. So it's really interesting to think about how a lot of the teams we mentioned also would probably prefer Chris Paul as opposed to Russell Westbrook. Like, Chris Paul is a better shooter. He complements players a little bit better, I think, than Russ does and would. Obviously, Russ is really good in all world, but a lot of the things he does really well can be duplicated. It's found on a lot of the rosters of the contenders. They have players who bring what Russ does to the table. I think Chris Paul would be a big difference maker in that the Bucks could go get him and know he's going to add shooting. They know that in Phoenix, if they went out and got Chris Paul, that he would bring a veteran point guard with poise who can really take the young players under his wing and has won a lot of games. So same thing with like the Clippers in Utah. Chris Paul would immediately be able to walk in. He can knock down shots. He's got poise. He's got leadership. He kind of brings the extra that Russ, for lack of better reason, just isn't always like known for. whether it's valid or not. Again, going back into New York, like the Knicks would probably prefer to go get Chris Paul. Like he could teach, he could groom. He's done it in OKC. He can knock down shots. He can really do it all. He doesn't have the limitations or glaring holes that Russ does for players that are getting paid what they are. So it's just really interesting to think about. Like just 1 year ago, when you looked at the trade between the Rockets and the Thunder, you really felt like the Rockets were going to come out ahead in the near future, at least. And again, looking back, it's really interesting to see how it's a little bit flipped. So in closing, obviously Russell Westbrook has been incredible his whole career. Like he's one of the best players to watch. He's one of my favorite players. And it's sort of a bummer to see where his game is now and how he's kind of bounced around slightly. I think back, obviously, when he was with the Thunder, with Durant, with Harden and all that talent that they had, they showed so much promise. They were so young. They challenged teams like the Lakers, and really they lived up to the promise. They made the finals. They were on their way. Unfortunately, things just didn't work out. Like the titles that we envisioned didn't come to fruition, but we're just going to have to see how this plans out. You know, this is just the next journey for Russ. And as always, like he doesn't seem too stressed about it. Like he obviously recently posted an adorable video of him with his kids, and like those are the fun things and important things of life are about, especially now with coronavirus. So we'll just have to wait and see and look forward to where he ends up. But again, I hope you really enjoyed this quick reaction video. Please go comment below. Let us know where you think he'll be traded to and play next year. And as always, go subscribe, and we'll see you back soon.